Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another TMDSAS Office Hour. My name is Suleima, and I am the TMDSAS Support Coordinator with TMDSAS. And so this session is going to be an extension of the last 2 weeks that we've had. Mainly, our focus is to cover any questions that there are about the veterinary application, since the deadline is this Friday at 11:59 p.m., along with the veterinary evaluation forms. And you should also be on the lookout for any other deadlines that pertain to you, such as the secondary applications coming from school's end and their portal, as well as in case school requires that you also submit Casper. Um, that's another area where you would have to take a look at and see if that's something that your school requires where you are applying. And this would be for either Texas A&M or Texas Tech, both of our vet schools on our application. However, if you are another applicant type, if you're a medical, dental, or podiatry applicant who happens to have a couple questions as well for their application, you are also more than welcome to enter those into the chat. We will also answer those as they come our way. But just being mindful that the deadline is coming up for our vet applicants. We want to make sure that they have a space that they will be able to ask those questions. So, to go ahead and get started, I will go ahead and show you guys. I know that a lot of our questions that we've been receiving on our end here at TMDSCS are from our applicants that are currently working on their application before the deadline. And a lot of the questions that we get are similar to that of activities. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about that really quick. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Okay, give me 1 second. And at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to enter those into the chat. We're going to be here as long as it is needed for you guys, for us to be here. It can be the whole hour or only 30 minutes, just depending on however long it takes to get through all the questions that come our way. Okay, so, all right, so I'm using one screen, so it's going to be a little different. Okay, okay, so I believe you should be able to see my screen at this point. So, we are in the tmdsas.com website, as you can see here. If at any point you have any questions about the processing of your application, you can find that here. Our team is processing applications that were submitted on July 28th. And then the letters of evaluation, which these methods don't relate to the veterinary application because you guys have a separate vet evaluation form. But the methods are displayed here and let you know what day our team is currently processing those letters submitted on those specific dates. And in order to get access to our application guide, you go up to the top on Apply Now, click on Application Guide. And just a reminder that these sections over here on the left-hand side are a reflection of what your application looks like in each of those pages that you will also be working through. And the whole purpose of that is for this guide to mirror your application. So as you're working along, filling out your application, and if you do have two screens, you can have one with the application and then the other one with the guide. And you can follow along in the guide as you're filling out your application so you know what things to look out for, common mistakes that are seen and how to avoid those. All of that information is in there along with the instructions on how to fill out each section. So when we're looking at the activity section, I want you guys to, first of all, be aware that with activities, you want to make sure that what you enter is what you want there to be on your application. And the reason for that is because, as you can see here in red, you cannot make any changes or updates after submitting your application under any circumstances. So if you have planned activities that didn't end up happening, those are plans and the schools are aware about that. And so you don't have to worry about updating that because we can't update it anyway. So just be mindful of that and make sure that you go back and check your work. Make sure that everything on there is what you want, that there's no misspellings, that you're not missing any activities. Because after you submit, you will not be able to make any changes, update, or amend any of that. So the thing to remember with activities, and this is for all applicants, is you want to think about your activities and reflect back on those and see, okay, what is the narrative that I'm trying to communicate to school? What do I want them to know about my healthcare journey? And how do my activities support that narrative? So that's a way that you can strategize to see, okay, these are the activities that I have. This is what I want to talk about in each of those because this backs up my story. This gives them more information about me, my journey to getting into vet school or getting into dental school, whatever the case may be. Because that is what's going to drive your rationale for understanding where to place those. We don't want you to think of these categories that you see here on the right hand side as I have to find an activity that just falls in that category and just place as many as I can. As y'all know, we don't have a limit on how many activities you can enter into the application. However, that doesn't mean that you're just going to go overboard and try to find every single little thing that you can recall and just place it into a category for purposes of just adding something in that category. You want to be strategic about it, thinking about what it is that you are trying to communicate to the schools about that specific activity. Based off of that rationale, you will then determine what category to place it in. We do have guidance here in the application guide to help you with that rationale. It'll give you information that'll help you understand what that category consists of and what can go there. But ultimately, you have the ultimate decision. You have the power to make that determination of where it needs to go. And if you say this activity goes here, the schools are going to take your word for it. And that's not such a thing of whether you get something wrong. They're not out here trying to see if you are placing activities correctly in each category. They're more just trying to understand what your narrative is, what it is about your healthcare journey, what makes you you and the experiences that you experience and you explaining that into your application. So with that in mind, we do get questions about how far back you can list your activities. So with everyone else except for veterinary applicants, if you're a vet applicant, you can include activities from prior to graduating high school. However, if you are a dental, medical, or podiatry applicant, you cannot do that. You have to start listing your activities since you graduated high school. And with entering activities in multiple categories, that can happen. So you should only be listing your activity once unless your activities fall under one of these exceptions, and these only apply to dental, medical, and podiatry applicants. As you can see here for veterinary applicants, the vet schools do not encourage veterinary applicants to enter activities in multiple sections. We've had multiple school panels with the veterinary deans from the schools, and they do not want to see your activity listed more than once. They want you to stick to one category and just list it there. They do not encourage multiple cross listings like it is with the other schools from the medical, dental, and podiatry applicants. And so, if you are wondering whether an activity will fall under veterinary supervised experience or elsewhere, because for you guys as vet applicants, most of your activities are going to fall under veterinary supervised experience or animal experience. And so, a good rule of thumb is to go to those sections first and see if, based on that information that is given to guide you, would your activity fall into one of those two categories or would it be in another category? So, to follow along on this page, let's go down to veterinary supervised experience. We did make sure to update this information so it's a little bit more relevant for veterinary applicants who are asking all these questions at this time. And hopefully, the answer is a little bit more easier to find. And so we did host our office hours where our director, TMDSAS director, Enrique Hasso, did talk with us in the last 2 weeks, letting us know the difference between employment versus vet supervised experience or healthcare versus veterinary supervised experience. The key thing to point out here is that with veterinary supervised experience, you will list experiences where those were over 50% of your time was spent interacting with or under the direct supervision of a veterinarian. So that's the same strategy that you can use when determining or trying to figure out where your like employment can go. I know that some applicants work at a vet office, and so an example that our director gave us was it's listed down here actually. If you're on the fence about whether a vet office job should go under employment or veterinary supervised experience, one, remember that it can only go under one category. You can't place it under both. And a good way to make that determination to help you out with that is to decide if you were supervised directly by a veterinarian over 50% of the time in your job, then yes, it can go under veterinary supervised experience. If it was not, then you can list it under employment. And an example of this is yes, you did work at a vet office, but your main responsibility was to focus on admin work. So, such as like shredding paper or like filing files or on the computer, even because a lot of things are digital now. But that's an example of where you would reflect, okay, was my experience in this job m- mainly admin work? Was I actually doing something else that involved being supervised by a veterinarian over 50% of the time? And based on your answer, that'll tell you whether it needs to go into vet supervised experience or employment. Same thing with healthcare. I know we've seen that question a lot come our way as well. Especially for some folks who had originally started out as medical or dental student, focusing on working with humans, but then switched over to working with animals and looking to get into vet school. So this can be something that you guys might encounter. So the important thing here with healthcare is that healthcare activities would be any activity under any direct or observation or participation in patient care in a clinic, hospital, or with a physician or podiatrist in a formal way. So, the way we like to think about it is if this was a human interaction with the patient that is a human, then this would fall under healthcare. However, if it was with animals, then you might consider placing it elsewhere. So, again, the rule of thumb healthcare activities are for human related care, and veterinary supervised experience is any animal experience where you were supervised directly by a veterinarian over 50% of the time. So just use that as your general rule of thumb to help you determine whether it needs to go under vet supervised or healthcare, or in this case, your employment, if it needs to go under employment or vet supervised. Now, I've said that word a couple of times already, so um, let's go ahead and start looking at the questions. Alrighty. So I have a question, and this is from Amaya. I have a question regarding the experiences. Can employment be listed in the leadership portion? So this would depend if you're a veterinary applicant or not. So if you are a veterinary applicant, um, because schools don't want you to cross-list multiple activities into multiple or cross-list activities into multiple sections or categories, then the answer is you would most likely need to choose between one or the other. However, if you are not a veterinary applicant, if you're a medical, dental, or podiatry applicant, you can definitely do this. The thing to be looking out for here is with employment, you would talk about your employment aspect when you list it under the employment category. And then whenever you place it under the leadership category, you are only going to talk about that leadership portion in the leadership category. Do not copy and paste those descriptions because that's something that the schools do not want to see. While the medical, dental, and podiatry schools do let you list your activity in multiple categories, depending on those exceptions that we just saw in the screen share. Yes, they let you do that. However, they don't want you to copy and paste the description because that just at that point it's just being repetitive and it's not serving the purpose of why they made that exception to the rule, which is to see, okay, if you had an employment that then later resulted in a leadership position, yes, they want to hear about that. But we want you to only talk about the leadership aspect if you place it under the category leadership. And then your employment, such as your responsibilities and your role, that can all go under the employment category description. So make sure to just keep those separate. Okay. So moving on, a question from Suzanne. Hello, my question is about coursework. I started a course in summer 2024, but will receive an incomplete. I will complete it in the fall 2024. Do I re-enter the same course for fall 2024? That's a great question. So I think it would depend depending on how your school lists your course. So we've seen it to where some schools will list the incomplete in, let's say in this example, in summer 2024, according to your official transcript. And it'll be an incomplete until you finish the fall, and then you can come back and add the official grade to it. And then some schools will have that course listed not in the summer, but actually in the fall 2024, wherein you officially complete that course and receive an actual grade. So just I think in this case, just check out and see what's on your official transcript. If your official transcript has this course listed under summer 24, you can go ahead and list it with an incomplete I grade. And then just make sure that whenever you finish the course in the fall, that you come back and that you change the grade and if you at any point have any issues in changing the grade, you can always send a message in your portal. But you don't want to list it twice. You want to go what's off of your transcript and follow that. Okay, so question from Andrea. How would it be suggested to go about entering an extracurricular activity where I held leadership? Separate it from the date I joined leadership? Would this be considered entering in multiple times? Okay, so this is, again, this question is if you are a vet applicant or not. If you're a vet applicant, again, just be mindful that the schools do not want you to place an activity in multiple categories. So in this case, just be mindful of how you're listing your activity. So it sounds like let's say you were in your extracurricular. I'm just gonna make a guess here. Let's say last year, fall 2023 to, let's say, summer 2024. That's your extracurricular. You would talk about your extracurricular. And if you had, let's say, you had like a job, or not a job change, but like a title change within your organization. Let's say you were just a member of your co-ed, so service fraternity, your sorority, whatever the case may be, pre-health profession organization. Let's just say that you were just a regular member for 1 year. You can put that as extracurricular. And then for the leadership change, then that case, that sounds like your title would change from um, member to whatever it is, leadership title. And then you would talk about your leadership experience in that manner. But just make sure that you're just mindful of not copying and pasting again, and then that you kind of separate that out. So it's not you pasting this activity in multiple categories. And if you have any follow-up questions about that, because I know this can be a little confusing, you can always send us a message to double check with us and our team. Our team is on it, especially with the vet application deadline coming up. We want to make sure that your questions are being addressed. And so, anytime that you send a message in your portal, we do have access to go into your application, take a look at the specific section that you need us to see to help you out. Okay, so question from Andre. Hi, for the vet supervised activities, how would I log hours for one veterinary job where I worked under multiple different veterinarians? Okay, great question. So, if I'm understanding correctly, the first thing that popped up for me was the multiple veterinarians. So, let's go back and see what the guide says about that. Now, I do know the sections of the guide left and right. I know where they're at. But every now and then I do need to go back and like double check what the category guidance is just to make sure. So this is for, let's see what category. Okay, vet supervised. Okay, so for the vet supervised experience guidance in the guide, it mentions that these should relate to veterinary clinical, agribusiness, or health science experiences you have had with veterinarians. Include all relevant experiences, whether it was voluntary, paid, or academic. These experiences reported in the section should be different from those entered for animal and employment experience. Experiences gained in high school may be included. Again, you guys are the exception to that rule. Um, let's see, do not include future expected hours of experience. So that's just kind of following along the lines of what we have outlined for current versus planned activities. So just to make sure that you don't overinflate that. It is very important for the vet schools that you don't do that. So that's why they're very specific about making sure that you don't overinflate your hours or your experiences, and hence why they don't want they don't want activities in multiple categories. So here, you would indicate the activity name, whether it is volunteer experience or paid experience, location, veterinarian name. And yes, one thing that I do remember from having the session with the veterinary school deans, is that they want to know who you were supervised by. Similarly to what the dental school deans had mentioned, the deans, vet school deans have also said that in their case, sometimes the field is, I mean, the field is a little bit smaller than it is in the medical field. And so they want to know exactly who you are being shadowed by. So for in this case, in this situation, because it sounds like you might have been at one place and had different veterinarians um, that you were working under, it sounds like you may need to be, I mean, depending on what you did with each veterinarian, if it was different, right? If it was, maybe I want the same place, but this veterinarian, you did something specific here and there, or like working with different animals, perhaps, then that might be something that you might want to um, be careful with your hours. If you want to, specifically, if you want to highlight, this specific veterinarian, I did this. This was really meaningful. You would want to make sure that your hours that you're logging are only reflecting like that time that you were with that veterinarian and not the whole experience. So I guess if we're taking like a year into consideration here as like an example, instead of using the year's worth of hours under this one veterinarian, like you would specify a little bit less because you were with this veterinarian for a certain amount of time. So just be careful with your hours. Yes, you do want to be accurate, but at the same time, you don't want to overinflate that because that's the one thing that schools have mentioned over and over again. They don't want to see an overinflation of hours and overinflation of activities. Okay, let's see. Okay, and I think, and you followed up with this, but just to reiterate, just to make sure, because I'm trying to follow along here with the questions. So again, a good rule of thumb, you guys, is it going to be vet supervised experience or something else? A good rule of thumb, always think back to your time. Was over 50% of the time working directly or under a veterinarian? If the answer is yes, vet supervised. If the answer is no, it can go in any other category. I think that sets it a little bit more straightforward. And I think I actually like that guidance a little bit better because unlike with medical, dental, and podiatry, you're having to think about, okay, let's be strategic. What do I want to place where? But with the vet schools, I do like that over 50% of the time because that tells you, okay, where do I need to place my activity? Okay. So, can graduation stoles slash sashes from clubs count as the non-academic recognition section? Yeah, if it was meaningful for you, it's definitely meaningful to the schools. Um, Definitely taking that from our director. Um, he definitely mentioned that that if it's something that it's important to you, it's going to be important to the schools. Remember that with your narrative, you are focusing. Your narrative is what you want to communicate to the schools, and your activities are going to reflect that. They're going to back up your narrative. So if this is something that was very important to you, yeah, this sounds like this could be something that you can put under non-academic recognition if you believe that's how it should that's where it should go. um, Definitely the schools will take your word for it. They again, this is not a, oh no, that should have actually been under academic recognition, or you know what, that should have been in extracurriculars, we're going to mark that off. They're not like that. They will take your word on whatever it is that they will go with what you say. So if you say my graduation stoles and sessions go in non-academic, okay, great, we'll take your word for that. They're not gonna pick at your activities and say, "Oh no, Amaya listed this in non-academic when it should have been academic recognition. We're gonna mark that off." No, none of that. So don't worry about that, and I hope that that hopefully gets across and makes things a little bit more at ease, especially with activities, because I know that can be overwhelming. Okay. So, question from Brenna. If I have to repeat an achievement, what would be the best way to repeat it? I guess in this case, since I don't, um, okay, if I didn't really see any context with this, but again, if you're a veterinary applicant, just be mindful. The schools do not want you to enter the activity in multiple categories. Don't want to see a repetition or inflation of hours. They just want to see they, yeah, they don't want overly done. That's basically the like what the advice is around activities. So in this case, I would just ask with your achievement, is this, for example, was this like a dean's or president's list achievement? Because if it is, it's up to you on how you want to list it out. If you want to break it down because it is one, let's say that well, I'm just going to take this example. If it's a dean's or president's list example of a repeat achievement, let's say that during the 4 years of undergrad, I got this award my first semester of freshman year through my senior year. You could just put it in as one activity and then, you know, fall whenever you started freshman year till senior year, spring 2025, or in this case, since you don't know yet, fall 2024 or summer 2024, whatever the case may be. And then you would just list in the description box like the dates or the semesters in which you received it. Now, if you got it, like let's say like the second semester of your freshman year and you didn't get it again until like later on, you might want to break it down if that's easier for you. Again, it's up to you. Um, but then again, just be mindful that if you are a veterinary applicant, just be mindful of that, of repeating it, and it might be a little bit easier if you just go ahead and put it and list it as one, and then just put the description in, or make sure that your description describes of the semesters at which, or the terms in which you received it. And I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to cater to both the fact that we have semester and quarter systems. I personally went to semester school, so I have that stuck in my head. Okay. So, if I didn't sign up for the Casper, am I still able to apply and try to take it? That's a great question. So, I believe this depends on which school you're applying to. Um, I don't know if you guys have checked this, and I hope you guys have because this is part of the deadlines and keeping up with your application. But let's go ahead, and I want to make sure that you guys can see this. So on our website, if you go up to apply now and click on, or actually even better yet, let's go to after submitting. After submitting, you definitely want to check out this page because it tells you the things that you have to follow up with after submitting your application and to tell you what's up ahead. So oh, with the Casper, we can click over here on the right-hand side, go down to veterinary, and see which schools require the Casper. So, like I said, it just depends on the school that you're applying to. So, Texas A&M Veterinary School of Veterinary Medicine, they do want the Casper. So, they require that you take it for admissions. The last day to register for a Casper assessment exam is August 22nd, so last week. If you did get to register before then, your last day to complete the Casper assessment is August 27th, so yesterday. And the deadline to submit your Casper score information, whatnot, to Texas A&M is on Friday, on the same day as the deadline for your application and your evaluation forms. Now, if you're only applying to Texas Tech School of Veterinary Medicine, they do not require the Casper, and so you don't have to worry about that. And you can go ahead with still submitting your application for consideration because they don't require the Casper. Another thing with secondary applications, this is also on the right-hand side panel. Definitely very, very important. Both schools do require the secondary application and different deadline dates. So A&M also due Friday, August 30th at 11:59 p.m. And Texas Tech University School of Veterinary Medicine is actually due a month after Friday, so September 30th at 5 p.m. Central Time. So just be mindful of this, guys. I keep saying that not to sound repetitive, but just keeping in mind what schools you're applying to. Definitely check out those sections. Remember, it's going to be your after submitting page in the application guide, looking at Casper and secondary application information. So I hope I answered your question. Uh, all to say, you if you didn't sign up for the Casper, you can still apply um, to try to take it if you would like. But it sounds like if you haven't registered, it might be a little late for the A&M school, but you should still be good to go for the tech school. Okay. Yes, and Suzanne, you're totally right. Yeah, the last day was um, yesterday, the 27th. And just because 'cause I'm seeing this right now, um, so John, that's okay. The office hours for this last couple weeks have been specifically for vet applicants because their application deadline is coming up, but, um, you can go ahead and ask your questions here too. I'll just very briefly shift over to medical. So some Texas schools only accept MCAT scores up to September 1st. What if the test date is after the MCAT score deadline? Would I have to apply again to that school next year? Okay, so I don't have this sheet. It's in my cubicle. But that has the last test date that the medical schools will accept for an MCAT. It is in September. So if they say maybe let me see if I can find it online. Okay, so the last day that you can take the MCAT for medical school this cycle is September 14th, and the score would be released on October 1st. So that is your very last day that you can take it. Um, if your test day, however, is after September 14th, then no, it would not be considered for this application cycle. You can still take it, but then yes, you would. If you were interested in applying in a future cycle, like next year, then at that point, that score would be considered. But for EY 2025, any MCAT test dates after September 14th will not be accepted or considered. But if they have a specific deadline and by which they want you to have your score ready, which I believe all the medical schools are on board with accepting that very last score from September 14th being received on October 1st, then you should be fine. But if not for some reason, then you would just want to see if maybe you can reschedule, or if not, then that's something for next cycle. And I hope I answered your question. If not, let me know. I'm going to go back up and make sure that I didn't miss any from our vet applicants. Okay, so for the vet application, and thank you for clarifying. For the meaningful experiences section, can I only talk about activities I listed? And should I choose activities I didn't talk about in my personal essay? Great question. Let's take a look at the application guide because I know that information is there and I want you guys to be able to find it. So, this is when I wish I had my two monitors. Okay, let's go to activities. So, meaningful activities. So, you're going to choose your top three meaningful activities. This is select three of your previously listed activities from any of your activity categories to expand upon that you would choose as meaningful. So, yes, your meaningful experiences do have to come from any three that you previously already listed in your activity section. So, based on what you list, choose three that were the most meaningful to you, and this is just like it's basically like another opportunity to for you to like further elaborate and expand on why that was meaningful, um, and being able to elaborate on it a little bit further. Okay. Would you classify recover certification and other CE attendance under academic or non-academic recognition? It's a great question. I would actually give this back to you and ask you, where do you think it should go? Again, the determination is up to you guys. If you read over our guide, there is a little section in there throughout the guide that says that we cannot advise you on where to list your activities. We do have that page that's full of information, full of guidance. It is there to help you out, guide you through the process of reflecting on your activities, but ultimately you make the decision on where it should be placed. Remember that wherever you place your activity, the school won't question it. The school will, follow you. They'll go through with it. Okay, you place it there. Okay, that's where it should go. That's where it should go because that's where the applicant believes it should go based on their experiences, values, lessons learned, and what they want to communicate to us and why it was important. So unfortunately, I we are not allowed to tell you, yes, this needs to go here. But what we can do is let you know that and reassure you that either or sounds like it would be like a good fit for what you have mentioned. But I would highly encourage you to make that determination yourself because you guys are empowered to make that decision. So wherever, based on the guidance that's given in the guide, based on academic versus non-academic, I would encourage you to kind of glance over that guidance and then reflect on your activity to help you decide which category it would best fall under. Remember, there's no right or wrong way of doing this, guys. If you select academic, you won't be penalized for it supposedly going under non-academic. And I know um, this kind of guidance might be a little uncertain and maybe a little nerve-wracking. I understand that as well. But with that being said, why there is some guidance but some loose answers is because ultimately it is up to you guys. The schools want to see your critical thinking. They want to see why this experience was important to you, why you placed it where you placed it. And if you place it there, they're going to go with that too. They're not out here trying to mark you off for misplacing an activity where it shouldn't go. They're not going to see an activity and they're like, oh, that definitely does not go there. That should have been over here. They're not going to do that. Ultimately, they want to see what you guys are thinking, what was important for y'all's journey and y'all's learning. And so if you decide whatever section or category you decide it goes under, they will back you up on that. I will back you up on that as well. All right, so moving along. Okay, so a lot of activities, guys. All right, so following up from Amaya, for employment, I held a job over multiple years, but it was not consistent throughout every week, sometimes once a month or every other week. How should I put those hours per week? Great question. Again, being mindful of the vet schools uh, insisting on making sure that you don't overinflate your hours, right? I think here in this case, what would be most important would be your cumulative hours. I know that there are a couple of categories where it asks for your cumulative and your weekly hours, but I think ultimately what would be most important is making sure that your cumulative hours are accurate. And then what you could do is further explain in your description if the character kind of allows you for further explanation of that. You can say most of my this is my cumulative hours. Let's say it was 100 hours, right? And so per week for 52 weeks divided by that, I'm not great at math, but you would divide that up, right, by week. And then you can put in the description some, during the semester, during the school year, I maybe did a couple, maybe I did like 2 hours a week or something like that. In the summertime is where I got my 30 hours or whatnot. But ultimately, what would be the most important here is that you get your cumulative hours are not those are accurate. If you have your log and you did 100 hours, your cumulative hours should be 100, even if that might look a little different with your weekly hours once it's divided up. Okay. So if my direct supervisor at a large teaching hospital is not a DBM, can I put her down or does it have to be a DBM? Okay. So in this case, is this was this just a like admin direct supervisor, I guess I would ask. And just let me know just so I can kind of get a bigger picture. But based on what the guide has said, let me go back and check on that. So again, the good rule of thumb to use is that over 50% of the time, um, let's see, vet supervised, over 50% of your time was spent interacting with or under the direct supervision of a veterinarian. Yeah, yeah, with the vet schools is pretty straightforward, I would say. So I would just use that. So if this was not a direct super, like it was not a veterinarian who you were directly under, and interacting with over 50% of the time, it probably does not go here under veterinary supervised, but rather another category. Since you mentioned that this does have large teaching hospital. So working with large animals, it sounds like this might be something where you can potentially even list it under animal experience. Um, yeah, I think that would be the best bet if that's the situation and that's the case. But again, 50% guys, over 50% of the time working with directly or under the supervision of a veterinarian. Okay, for the dean's list, they ask to separate it on the application guide. Okay. Let's see. We've actually heard it from in both ways. Our director has mentioned, depending on, for example, like the example that I gave earlier, if I had the dean's list throughout all of my 4 years, or maybe I got it every semester except for one or two, whatever makes the most sense to me. If I got it that many times, I probably would just lump it together. But if it makes the most sense in your journey, um, if it's reflecting a little bit of like how your academic year was, and one semester was more challenging than the other, then you might want to break it down. But again, just whatever makes the most sense in your timeline, and with the stipulation of the schools, making sure that you don't enter things in for multiple categories ultimately. So yeah, whatever fits more in your timeline, whichever makes the most sense to reflect your academic journey. Okay. All right. Question from Judy. For schools requiring Casper, do results get automatically sent to the college you listed on the Casper site, or must that me done, or must I do that manually? A great question. So when it comes to Casper, we don't manage Casper or any of the scores that the schools will ultimately receive. So I would definitely take this question to the Casper site just to make sure. I believe that it might, just based on for example, like MCAT and DAT, once the applicant releases their score to Team DCS or a dental school in the DAT situation, then yes, that would on you would have to make sure to prompt that release for it to go to wherever it needs to go. Um, it might work that same way. I'm not quite sure. It's definitely a great question, and I would recommend that you check out the Casper website and information about how the scores are released. Okay. Now we are actually, wow, we are almost um, up at the hour. So we have just a few more minutes. It's almost 3, and so I want to make sure that I'm mindful or like I'm careful with considerate of everyone's time and making sure that we get through everyone's questions. Again, if you are unsure of something that comes up either after hours, because again, we're open from 9 to 5, if and phones are not open, or 9, there's a morning shift and then there's an afternoon shift, right? But if you have questions like outside of that during business hours, you can always send us a message in your portal. Again, that is attached to your application, and so it'll allow our team members to go in, look at whatever it is that you need us to see to help you out, filling out the or completing your application and getting it submitted by Friday. We do have our resources. We do have the again, as you saw, we have the guide. We also have last week's office hours, which are also very insightful. I did have our director with us, and so he was also sharing a lot of information when it comes to activities. So if you haven't already checked that out, highly, highly, highly recommend that you do. We also had the previous week before that, we also had an office hour again dedicated to our veterinary applicants and addressing those questions. So definitely check those out. The school panels, we do have those up on our YouTube channel as well. We have the school panel that we hosted with the veterinary schools. They go more in depth about what they want to see on your application regarding activities, answering those questions about when to place them multiple times, perhaps addressing that, helping you kind of determine where it would be placed. They give some examples of that as well. And that is a school panel that was for EY. We have two school panel sessions that are up on our channel. They are from previous cycles, but that information is still relevant for this cycle. It's still very helpful. Again, it's covering activities, what they want to see in your essays, um, all of that regarding your veterinary supervise and animal hours, animal experience hours, the courses that they require, everything regarding vet school. They will definitely have the answer for that and have that in the school panel. So if you haven't already, check it out. Those are not too long either. Those are about an hour. So if you were with us since the beginning, you sat through an hour with us. And so you could definitely sit through an hour of just rewatching the school panels just to make sure there's nothing that you missed or left out. So definitely check that out. And okay, I'm going to look at these last few questions that we have before our time is up. Okay. All right, do you see there's a couple that were not veterinary as well? So let me just quickly address those before we go. Okay, so for the PCR, do we fill it out ourselves from the PDF or is it coming from our transcript records? I'm so confused about this part. Great question. So once your application is transmitted, this means that the schools now have your application. It is now available for them to see on their end. You will have the PCR, which is um, it's the oh, I forgot what the P is, but it's basically a record of your coursework, everything that you entered into your application based off of your official transcripts. And so that is then generated, and you'll be able to see what the PCR is. So just very quickly, because this also applies to vet applicants, so I want to make sure that those of y'all that are still with us also know where to find this information to know how to read the PCR and know that it also applies to you. So let me quickly show you guys where that's located. So after submitting, again, this is after it gets transmitted, you'll scroll down to reviewing your PCR. And so with the PCR, oh, prerequisite coursework report, that's what it stands for. So it would only show you your prerequisites on the PCR, and it'll show you if, based on the education requirements that are listed here, because these are the requirements for the schools. It tells you how many hours you need per each prereq, so physics, English, statistics, etc. Again, with veterinary applicants, though, I know that the schools do require for you to have a speech requirement. However, Team DSAS does not have that in the overall prerequisites. So your PCR won't have a speech section. It'll only have English. Um, so that is because the speech requirement is school specific. Similarly, with the if you're applying to medical school, to Baylor College of Medical School, they require a humanities certain number of hours. That will also not be on your PCR because that is a school specific requirement. So when looking back at your PCR, um, again, this is going to show your prerequisites, what counts as your prerequisites, if you're deficient in any hours. It's not going to show you every course that you ever took that counts as BCPM. As you can see from the table here, included in your PCR, yes, it does have your prerequisites. Um, are your prerequisites included in the BCPM GPA? Yes, except for English, because it's not biology, chemistry, physics, or math. So if you had any non-science courses for or science courses for non-majors, yes, those are included in the BCPM, and they will not, however, they will not be included in the PCR because again, that only shows you the prerequisites or classes that count as prerequisites on that report, and classes or science courses for non-majors do not count as prerequisites. Again, something we always get this question: why are my graduate courses not on my PCR? That's because they are not prerequisites. Graduate courses cannot count as prerequisites. They may be included in your BCPM GPA, just depending on what your graduate degree was. And same thing with the rest of these courses: no, no, and no. So with the PCR, if you have any prerequisite hour deficiencies, just know that these will not prevent you from getting your application reviewed, processed on our end. It won't prevent the schools from seeing it on their end or the admissions committee is reviewing it. It will not prevent you from obtaining interviews. So before you freak out, just know that that's not a bad thing. It's actually very, very common for the schools to see applicants with deficiencies. And the reason for that is because a lot of our applicants are the traditional applicant. So, traditional applicant in the sense that they are currently in undergrad and they applied the summer before their senior year. So, of course, you don't have all your prereqs done because you still have a whole year to finish. So it's actually very common. But again, these will not prevent your application from being processed by your team. It will not prevent you from the schools or the application getting out to the schools. It will not prevent them from reviewing your application. And it will not prevent them from sending out interview invites to you. However, you do want to monitor this or any deficiencies on the PCR because it's better to get those straightened out earlier rather than later, right before you're about to matriculate, right before you're supposed to register for classes, but you can't because you are deficient in your PCR. And you don't want to be trying to take care of that at the very last minute. It's very stressful. It's not a fun time. So the reason why there might be deficiencies, if you had a COVID term and your courses for pass fail satisfactory credit, those will not show up on the PCR. As long as your courses, for example, if you have a bio lab or chemistry course and it shows in your individual college coursework section, let's say fall 2020, a bio lab, it was agreed to pass. As long as it says bio lab in the course area, that counts as a prereq. It's just not going to show up on the PCR because of the grade. Another thing to be looking out for is biology prerequisites. Um, for since life cycle, it's any biochemistry courses are going to go into that biochemistry section rather than biology. And that's just to sort it out by the subject. It may cause a deficiency, but this is not an alarm. The schools are aware of this new change, and so they know that if they see like a deficiency with biology, but you have like 5 classes of biochemistry, it's usually not a big deal, and they usually go ahead and say, okay, yeah, you met the hour requirements, but just double check with your school. Another case, again, going back to that traditional applicant journey, if you have future courses that you haven't taken yet, that NY grade is going to show up on the PCR and may cause a deficiency, or it will show as a deficiency, but that gets cleared out once you have your official grade. If you're on the quarter system, there might be instances in when you see like a zero point 0.3 hour deficiency. That's totally okay, totally normal because this is because of the quarter system sequence. And the schools are very aware of this, and this happens a lot with students from a school in California. Another thing is maybe you perhaps enter your dual credit courses as transfer courses under your main institution, and that causes incorrect course information. So just make sure to double check your courses. If that needs to be corrected, send us a message. Again, obvious one here, if your grade is lower than a C, it doesn't count because it's lower than a C for a prerequisite course. But if you find that it's for any other reasons, you already checked all of this and that's you can't seem to figure out why you have the PCR, just double check, look it over again, look over that page again. It's in after submitting, reviewing your PCR. If you have any follow-up questions about that, you can always send us a message and we will be glad to take a look at that with you. All right. So it is 3 o'clock. Guys, thank you so much for staying with us throughout this whole duration of the session. Very jam-packed with questions. I expected nothing less because this is the application deadline week. I wish you guys all the best of luck and remember to use our resources, use the guide, use the videos that we have on our YouTube channel. Send us a message in your internal messaging feature if you have any questions. This is in your portal. And again, just wishing you all the best of luck. Make sure that you remind your evaluators to submit their evaluations because those are also due on Friday at the same time as your application. Don't forget your secondary applications and don't forget to check on those Casper information to see if it's required for you. All right. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great day and great week, and good luck. Bye, everyone.